I've got a question in case you're thinking about it.
Sure,
I was
sure.
just coming back to that point about you saying that what Richard Dawkins was saying, that apostasy
Yeah.
is could be punishable by law and
By
killing.
the-
So are you saying, because you believe in that objective morality, are you saying that is right in this day and age? So killing for apostasy, if somebody's actually proclaiming apostasy in front of everybody, like how it is.
Let me tell you something. I think this is, I said to you
I know
before,
it's
interesting question about this is ridda, yeah, which is the idea of apostasy, how when someone becomes Muslim and leaves Islam. Now, there's two things you have to understand. Yeah? Generally speaking, if there's an Islamic state or an Islamic government and there's an Islamic ruler, traditionally, classically, in basically a Muslim country or something like that, there should be, I'm not saying there is, I mean, I can't account for all of history, but what there should be according to the Quran is freedoms that are afforded to every human being based on their religion, based on the Quranic verse, La ikraha fi din, in chapter 2, verse 256. So if you're a Christian, you're not allowed to be forced to be, obviously, a Muslim, or if you're a Jew, you're not allowed to be forced. That's a true part of the religion, which is not, it's not an apologetic thing to say. It's just exactly what all of the scholars have said about the Quran. Now, the question isn't this though. The question you've asked me is about people that were Muslim and come out of Islam.
Yeah.
Okay, and what is the punishment for those individuals?
and they're preaching.
And you're
in
saying
front
it,
of
and you've also said in this modern day and age. Now remember, anything that happens within the context of an Islamic governance is not applicable in England or in the United States. So even anything that you can find in the tradition is not applicable. So in this day and age in Britain, obviously if someone becomes Muslim, they're non-Muslim, no one is allowed by Islamic law to take the law into their own hands. They're not allowed to do that. That's why Islam, one thing that actually is similar between the liberal model, when I say liberal here, I'm talking with a small L, and I'm referring back to sort of Montesquieu and John Locke, where he believed in the sort of separation of powers and checks and balances of government. One thing that is similar between the Islamic model and the liberal model from a philosophical or political perspective is that both believe in the idea of a trial, free trial, checks and balances of government, transparency, etc. So from that angle, no one is allowed to take the law into their own hands. So if you've got, somebody who becomes Muslim, Barry, or becomes Muslim, and then the next day he decides to leave Islam upon inspection, he didn't like it or something, we're not allowed to go and say, look, where's Barry live? Let me find Barry and let me hurt Barry. I mean, I'm not going to do that, and that's haram. That would actually be disallowed by Islam. Now the third question, what about those Muslims living in the Muslim governance that have become non-Muslims? Now really and truly, and this is not apologetics, I promise you this is not apologetics. The issue here is not that they have become Muslim or non-Muslim. And I can prove this with evidences. The evidence is that, as we know, there were a lot of munafiqun. A munafiq is someone who is non-Muslim, yeah? He's a non-believer, I should say. He's a non-mu'min. He doesn't believe in Islam. Okay? And they sometimes even conspired at the time of the Prophet Muhammad against the Prophet Muhammad. Now, there were times where the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was told about who the munafiqun were. He was told about who the munafiqun were. And there were people, and munafiqun, remember this phrase encapsulates people that are not believers of Islam. Yeah? And that they said the shahada, so they proclaimed Islamic belief, and then they obviously don't believe Islam, yeah? Because they are munafiqun. Now, these individuals, these munafiqun, these hypocrites, whatever you want to translate it as, there were times where the Sahaba were given lists of who they were. And there's a famous story of Umar al-Khattab asking, who's on the list, etc. Now, the question is, if it was to do with what they believed in, everyone on that list would have been killed. Think of it this way. If it was to do with what they believed in, everyone in that list would have been killed. Because Allah has not been informed, the Prophet Muhammad has been informed of who they are, the Sahabi has been informed, we know who they are, that's it. If it was to do with what they believed in, then it would have been, that's it, finish you off, kill you, and that's that, right? But it's not to do with that. Really, But
if they were not killed, would it not be a mistake by people who actually understood, even Sahabas at that time? Because if it's clear in Quran, that is what you have to do. If you don't end up doing it,
No, the
that's
Quran
your
is not
mistake
clear.
rather than.
There's a hadith that says, "Man baddala dinuhu faqtuluhu." Yeah. Whoever changes his.
Just quickly, I've got to go. I've got to go for a walk. No worries, we're good talking. I'm going to complete this stuff. We'll get back to it.
Whoever changes his religion, then kill him. There's a hadith. It's sahih. But as I've explained to you, how comes that no jurist, no classical jurist, accepts that that is the case on an individual basis? Everyone says it's not in the case. So if someone becomes non-Muslim like that, so when does this thing apply? What are we talking about here? And that's why it's important.
Sorry, that word that you used,
You have a
non-believer.
video to put on YouTube.
Sorry, may I just say, sorry to interrupt, but would you say that word needs to be taken out of the Quran now?
Which one?
For non-believers. Just the simple word that you said, for non-believers. Which one?
No, apostasy is not what I just said. I'm talking about.
You said there is a word for non-believers.
Well,
What's the word called?
or even careful.
Yeah. Would you say it's only fair in this modern world that because they don't support that behaviour, the word should be eliminated from the Quran?
Well, the word kafir.
Because like apartheid,
Well, I'll tell you.
we still support
Okay.
apartheid.
Well, I'll tell you what. The word
This is
kafir.
bad. It needs to be eradicated from the Quran. John Paul Joseph.
John Paul Joseph. Thank you very much.
I'm a fantastic creature of the planet. Yes, I want my own planet. It's not with you guys, or with Christians, or Muslims, or Jews. I'm very selfish, I'm going to get my own planet as well. You're going to be a long way from it.
Everyone's going to wear that.
No one's going to be near me.
Everyone's going to have such
It's
funky
chaotic.
clothing.
I haven't got the mathematical or the religious answer either.
Yes,
But I can't give you it because I'm not living on promises.
I see.
Unlike yourself, you live on a promise. There is a holy land for you.
Okay, I was in the middle of saying something.
Yeah,
So
but
do you
I tell
mind
you
if I
what,
finish off what I was just
My
about saying?
place is real, but I'm not here to preach to you.
No, I'm
And
with
I'm
you.
not going to share it or tell you about it. It's a secret.
Okay, I'll try and finish off what I was saying because I think I was midway. Where death penalty in Islam, there's another hadith that says where the death penalty in Islam is applicable is in 3 cases, and this was one of them. So apostasy here has to be understood within the sociological context and the political context. Really what it is when people say, I'm sure you've heard of this before, that it's like treachery, it's treason, all this kind of things, yeah? That's not apologetics. That's not apologetics. And if it was, it would be applicable for us to kill the what do you call it, the apostate in any circumstance. And it would have been applicable to kill the munafiqun. No doubt, this is exactly what this is. If those same people were advocating that this is such an incredible law, and by the way, the conditions of it are incredible, of treachery laws in Islam, which is ridda. It's a treachery law, that's what it is. If they're advocating that it's wrong and they're so upset about and angry about it, then they should go ahead and go to all of these countries, of the 206 countries that have these in operation. I think a majority of them, not Alam, but probably a large proportion of them, yes, have treachery laws or treason laws.
Yeah.
So go to these countries and tell them that
Absolutely,
that's
yeah.
how it is.
And I agree with it. But don't you think those are human laws? So human laws could have flaws in it, but a divine law
so the divine
shouldn't
law-
have any flaws in it.
Yeah.
So is there any circumstances?
What's
So I'm just finish up. But is there any circumstances where apostasy could be punishable by law? Is there any circumstances?
Well, I mean, as I said to you before, when it is
Because it's
When
it's
basically-
an act of
okay.
mind, really, isn't it?
What
That you have.
classically, people when they entered into a social contract, yeah?
Yeah.
Because even Hobbes talks about a social contract. Okay. So, Thomas Hobbes, yeah? He talks about a social
No,
contract.
when it is you, so I wouldn't know.
And he talks about so this idea of social contract is actually something which is even around. It's something which is you can find in liberal law, yeah, or liberal philosophy. Yeah? Leviathan is a book that Hobbes wrote, and basically the idea of a social contract is that you are a free agent, yeah. You start off as a free agent, but then you enter a social contract. In this modern day, it would be like when you vote, or when you have a citizenship. That social contract means that you have to obey certain laws. This is a completely uncontroversial concept. It exists across the whole world. When you
have by your
I have a passport, a British passport. I know some people might not believe me, but because I was born in this country, yeah, I was born in St. Mary's Hospital. Yeah? So when my father went to the registry office or my mum, whoever it was, and they got my birth certificate, officially my social contract in a sense, in one sense,
Okay, I've seen it.
started.
Yeah.
We can't say in any sense that the social contract you were ever completely free. That's why Rousseau, who's a French philosopher, he said that man is born free, but everywhere is in chains.
Yeah.
Interesting phraseology there. I mean, the interesting part is that people think that they're free in this world, in the Western world. There's no freedom. You're born into a social contract. You have a limited choice of two different political parties that you have to choose from. You're constricted by the law, by social and social expectations, by the media. Everywhere you go, you're monitored. Where's the freedom? There's very limited freedom. So I think that the illusion of freedom can be more dangerous than the reality of basically being imprisoned in some capacity or being confined in some capacity. And the problem now of the West is that they give us a good illusion of freedom. You see what I'm saying? So that's what I feel. I feel like what the West or Western proponents criticize Muslims of, they exercise themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like for example, the apostasy laws, read them. If you go to America, if you go to Guantanamo Bay, I mean, are we being really serious here? I mean, they actually have a prison. It's not in America, but it's operating from an American establishment. It's in Cuba. But they are doing worse than what you could imagine. You see? So the idea is really, they're trying to create a narrative where you have what Edward Said said is a didactic representation, a dualism, where you have the American white Superman and you have some bad man that they have to defeat, crush. And before it was the Russians, maybe before it was the
It's
Japanese.
always been like that in history, isn't it?
Yeah, and now a lot of people are actually being affected deeply by this kind of narrative. My point to you is that, look, let's not buy into this narrative too much. We've been played around by the Western colonial master for hundreds of years. It's enough. You have to start opening our minds, really. So we need to start opening our mind to alternatives, yeah? And if the West has come to a stage now where you have its highest proponents, highest philosophical proponents, yeah, saying that there is no objective morality, why and how? Why and how have they got any moral high ground now to tell us all the rest of the world what to do? They don't. So let the woman wear her veil, let the man marry four, do whatever he wants. You know, at the end of the day, worse. Or I'm saying worse here in the Western capacity, because at the end of the day, they have no moral high ground. There's no way of objectifying, making them moral objective. They can only say, we can do this because of a Western reasoning, because we went through the Enlightenment and the Renaissance. That's really a Western supremacy way of thinking about it. And there's a whole scholastic tradition now called post-colonial studies that assesses this Western supremacist mentality. By the way, this Western supremacy is so deeply entrenched that almost every outlet, whether it's left-wing or right-wing or centrist, that you will read or hear in this country or in the West has democratic and liberal reasoning as a presupposition. If you say the word undemocratic, it means bad. If you say the word illiberal, it means bad. But prove to me first that democracy is an objective truth. Prove to me first that liberalism is an objective truth. If you can't prove these philosophies objectively, there is no reason for you to equate them with objective type moralities. And try to spread this figuratively and literally by the sword.
Are you saying all these people who are saying that liberalism is good, democracy, are they saying these are objective truths or objective
they make it seem
moral
like
values? Is that what it is?
That's the
Because
issue.
I don't think it is. I think it's a evolved morality, as I said, over the years. I mean, now it's
Are
a
you
different
Muslim?
time. I'm not a Muslim. No, yeah, I'm not. So to me, these are, I mean, what other theories are actually objectively true, apart from, say, mathematics or some of the other bits, like logical truths, like your hair black and stuff. But apart from that, there are no theories that are objectively true. I mean, most of them are, I mean, there's always open for interpretation. So any kind of theory you can propose to guide the human being, they are not objective. I mean, apart from the fact that you do believe in objective, if you do believe in objective sort of truth, that's a different thing. But Give me another theory which is objectively true.
Well, obviously, like from our angle, that we believe that the objective. Look, there is a need in the first instance to prove the Quran to be the word of Allah. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
When if that person is satisfied with the evidence that's provided, then then by extension there's an all-knowing entity that knows the sociological, physiological, psychological, and emotional reality of the human society. Yeah. Therefore, any injunction that is Quranic or Islamic will by extension be objective. And that is why objective morality can be attained from a believer that believes.
So from
in
a non-believer point of view, anything else, any other theory which is currently in the world, could you give me? Because you're talking about you have to prove the objectivity of the morality you are proposing. Is there any other theory out there which is objectively true? I can't. I mean, I'm not.
Yeah, no, you can't.
I'm not that.
Basically, I genuinely believe that there is no way you can obtain objective morality unless you presuppose that there is a greater entity that has all knowledge that then dispenses this information.
That is the only way to do it.
Yes, that's the only way to do it. Because then you have to understand that human beings, if we all unite, all 7 billion of us, and somehow there was some way of uniting all of our energies and intelligence together, we would yet be closer to knowing nothing than we would to be knowing everything. So can you imagine the ignorance of humankind? Despite the fact that they were the top of the food cycle and we are very intelligent comparative to animals and germs and bacteria, but yet there's so much to know that we have limited knowledge. Therefore, when it comes to things like morality, we cannot presuppose that this is just because it's liberal and it's a white man wrote it. Let's be frank. A white man wrote it.
I would say so. I mean, these are coming from Greek philosophers. A lot of these things.
White.
Okay, yeah. So
Still Western. No, when I say look,
we do call
democracy
them
as an
Western.
example, right? It started in Athens, right? 2,000 something years ago, right? And democracy comes from the word demos and kratia, meaning people power. They're 2 Greek words. Obviously, as populations grew, there was a need for direct democracy to transfer into what is referred to as representative democracy. Because obviously you can't keep doing referendums every time there's an issue, yeah? So now that's why you have a system today where you have an election of some sorts, and that election gets the representative in charge, the power, to make decisions on your behalf. This construct is a Western construct. It's a white man's construct. Okay, it's been refined by the white man. For you to say that this should be what is obeyed completely in its entirety, as this is basically has been packaged by the white man, would actually presuppose some kind of Western or white supremacy. Why should we believe this if it's not objective? Think about it. Why should we believe this? They'll say because it works. There's lots of things that works. Authoritarianism works. Dictatorship works.
Should we not believe in it because it's the best?
By the way, I don't like dictatorship or anything.
Best thing out there, as in if there are any other good alternatives to democracy or representative democracy, which might be actually coming.
What's good? You can't even use it as an atheist.
What's the answer?
I'm talking about basically morality. You see what I'm saying? From an atheistic perspective, and I'm fusing it here with white people. Like nowadays, they associate liberal reasoning, democratic reasoning, with almost, you know what I'm saying, a true reasoning. So,
but is it not all evolving? I mean, it is. In future, when everybody's got phones now, it could be a different form of democracy that you press a button and say yes to everything, and that representative democracy then evolves into a different kind of democracy.
Accepted, yeah, that's right. But the issue with evolution here is that sometimes you can say evolution leads to, for example, an increased intelligence. By the way, this is an interesting point, yeah? Because that's what evolution, you develop more features, right? For survival functionality. This is a biological rendering of evolution. From a moral perspective, there is no such rendering. Because in biology you use evolution for survival. In the moral landscape, and by the way, there's written works about evolution, basically evolving social ideas and stuff like that. You can't say that this is evolving for the better unless you have sort of an end point that you're referring to. There's no way to assess that whether this is progressive or regressive. It's just subjective, that's all it is. And the issue is when nowadays in the white Western world, because really, just think of it this way, there's a person called Gramsci, yeah? He's kind of like a socialist, kind of left-wing person. He made it like a power hegemony model. really this is useful if we think about the West's operation with the rest of the world. Because the West is in control of the rest of the world, in a sense, I mean, there is a superpower called the United States of America. It's got the most media power. It sets the narrative. So when we read the newspaper or we watch TV, you only hear the certain questions being posed that the white Western man wants you to ask. There's no, I mean, imagine how ridiculous it would be if I went on Newsnight on BBC and I said, why don't you believe in God? I mean, this is haram. Imagine if I said, a woman says to me, ask me certain questions. I said, this is haram. I said, look, I'm not Muslim. Do you know what I mean? That's the answer. Okay, in the same way, now if a Muslim sits down on the chair, and then the Jeremy Paxman comes along and starts asking him questions. But this is against this is against that, and all of his concepts that he's using are strictly white man's concepts, Western concepts. Why should I believe in your concepts? I'm not saying I reject every part of, by the way, liberalism or democracy. Of course, this is a different discussion. I'm just saying, as an objective morality, I don't accept it as an objective morality. Therefore, you shouldn't hold me to that standard.
Yes.
Yeah? Do you see what I'm saying? So, no, democracy, there are good parts of it. Yeah, and that correspond with Islam. Not in theory, but in practice. In theory, it's actually the opposite of Islam. You know that. In theory, democracy means people power. Islam means submission, slavery to Allah. One is telling you can be. Liberalism is kind of from liberalis, a Latin word which means kind of freedom. Yeah. Islam means slavery and submission to Allah. It's actually the opposite in theory. In practice, though, liberalism entails lots of things like checks and balances. Pluralism, freedom to practice whatever religion you want to practice. These things are actually concurrent with Islam. So I'm not knocking liberalism as a means altogether. I'm just saying as an objective morality, it doesn't stand, it doesn't have it.
I mean, in my understanding, I won't call these objective truth or objective moral values. I would call them just more current form of whatever version of morality we are living in the time frame. That is what I'm not going to call them objective. They're objectively
That's right. So
true.
we shouldn't be held to the standard, though.
Yeah.
That's the issue. Like nowadays, the issue here is that the West keeps trying to. This is why I say trying to hold the rest of the world to its standard. Now it's only doing that because it can do that. Economically, militarily, and socially.
But don't you think there are a few good things which have come out of it? I know there are other bad things like equal pay and all 100%. Sorts.
And this is what I'm saying. Like, look, there's so many good things about liberalism in practice, like freedom of religion. You know what I'm saying? We accept freedom of religion as part of our religion. Freedom, transparency in government. Abu Bakr Siddiq, the first Caliph after Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whenever he used to buy a sheep or something, he used to go and ask the people in a referendum style, what do you think of, should I do this or not? And they had to agree before he go and buy the sheep because it was tax money. So he wouldn't do it without people's permission. Checks and balances in government is very important. You know, that is something we have in our system. So practically, this is a whole discussion. I think you have two extremes of Muslims generally. Yeah, you have one ignorant extreme, which kind of dismiss all of, say, liberalism is kufr, akbar. Okay, fine. If you believe that your purpose of life should be to be completely free, then of course it's kufr. Yeah, it's disbelief. But if we're talking about implementation, it's like a Venn diagram. You'll find that there are similarities and differences. Do you see what I'm saying? So, and same thing with feminism or any ideology. You're going to find similarities and differences. The problem is, and by the way, within those ideologies, within liberalism, there's different schools of thought. There are neoconservative liberals, which are not really liberals, by the way, in America. There are other kinds of left-leaning liberals, Marxist liberals. So there's the Venn diagrams within the Venn diagram. It's very complicated. We can't just kind of like, okay, this is easy. It's not easy. We have to have conversations about it. But my main thesis here, the argument, is that any ideology that comes from the West, we shouldn't use it to hold all the other countries to account to it. What about the Chinese? What about the Indians? Do they have a contribution? The culture of the Chinese is completely different to the culture. The African culture is, I'm sure there's some people in Speaker's Corner here that really would argue this point. Yeah, the African culture is completely different to Western culture. Why should we keep holding? Why should we keep holding, right, all of the other countries to account based on these things? You see what I'm saying? Anyways, I don't want to bore the man.
So how then do we get freedom of religion?
Why should we? Okay, look.
No, wait. How do we get freedom of religion in Islam, whereas we're told if we don't believe Islam,
Who told you that? Where were we told that? Go on, tell me.
all the time.
Go on, oh. Well, let me tell you
It
different.
says in the Quran, it says if you don't believe,
Go on.
you will go to hellfire.
Okay, that's in the afterlife though, isn't it? Okay, so Allah can do, if the afterlife is true as an atheist, you don't believe it. If it's true, then you're in trouble.
Yeah, right, so you don't have
It could be.
But if the afterlife is not true, which is what you believe, right, then you've got nothing to fear.
So I want freedom of religion now.
Well, we've got freedom of we got in a sense.
In a sense.
You have got freedom of religion.
But no, generally in Islam, it says like Africa. So people, we're not allowed to force people to become Muslim. That's genuinely what it is.
We want you to be able to choose God.
Okay, God can, but he gave us free. He gave us free will.
But is it not the problem that an entity like Allah saying that you can't have? No, I shouldn't be saying that you can't have freedom of religion. But if you go against Islam, you will be a resident of hellfire. Shouldn't? I mean, that entity doesn't sound like a.
Live peaceful entity.
One second, I'm confused. Are you Muslim?
No, he's not Muslim.
What's your belief?
I'm agnostic, so.
Oh yeah, Are you Muslim?
No.
Are you guys can? Oh no.
No.
I'll just be curious. Sorry. So, agnostic meaning you acknowledge that there is a higher.
There could be.
There could be. Okay. Is there? What reason do you have? What reason do you think you have? Oh, sorry.
No, you go.
Yeah, no, I was just basically saying, what reason do you think you have to come to the conclusion of maybe there is? Like, what brings you that doubt where you say?
I think I can't give an honest answer to the fact that everything is created and there could be a creator to, the starting point basically. So I don't have a very good answer to it. So that's why I think there might be a creator. Hence,
Okay, if the book we help you understand that, would you be?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's suppose